Well, it's been a very, very long time since the last time I tried to do this. Lots has happened for various reasons. I don't know quite why. It's that COVID factor. Anyhow, um, yeah, here's the second part of chapter 6 of The Draftsman. The Draftsman is my first novel. It's due out, it was originally due out forever ago, but now it's not due out until, let me see, April sometime, end of April. And since the last time I read from the book, there's been a massive effort to make it a lot better on the part of the Unbound team. So thank you to them. Anyway, the second part of chapter 6. Are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. Sitting, looking out at London's overpainted canvas, its untidy and spontaneous chaos shimmered against the fading sky, Martin was alone. He finished his tuna supper straight from the tin and slowly slipped at the remaining Paul Roger, growing warm, oxidized and stale in the bottom of the glass. Rereading this new letter from Bill, he pondered that seeing him might be good, and not just to say thank you for letting him have his old desk. Martin's appreciation of Bill Edwards was much like his appreciation of his dad. Martin just took for granted their trust and care and ignorance. He was his dad's job, his obligation, his proof that teaching the children would make Lenin's seed impossible to uproot, except it hadn't worked out quite as expected. Bill was another story, but he had unknowingly parented Martin into this new life of his. At Martin's insistence, Bill read the addresses at both his parents' funerals. Only Martin, Alison, Joshua, and Bill were present, and on the funeral director's recommendation, Bill had chosen the reading about the house with many rooms. No one was really listening. He helped Alison and Joshua with all the arrangements. He'd been the one who made sure that Lonnie Donegan singing The Party's Over would be played for their dad, and that there was no music for their mother at Martin's request. Alison had just gone along with it all, grieving as expected and curiously powerless. Their mother had died of lung cancer, and when the handful of funeral and crematorium staff riffed on, "What a shock, surely so unexpected, she was still young," Martin had been reminded again that people are fools, too often inclined to believe in the power of their own clichés. The woman smoked 40 a day, what did they expect? His dad had been killed on the road. They'd sent the police to the office, and as they stood to one side, Martin heard Bill ask if he minded him being there. Why? Why would I care? Except that the random brutality of the accident was less to be expected. Falling masonry from a church under renovation had smashed flat the cab, standing still and smoking in dusky London traffic. The driver and his fare had died instantly. They didn't know they should beware of falling angels. London's lights never really fade. Outside his flat, Martin saw the sky slowly turning orange and considered venturing out for a glass of wine and company. Then he thought again and changed his mind. He slept alone in his filthy round bed, fully clothed, and as a cigarette burned to its lonely end on the edge of the mattress, a soft smouldering whispered into the silence in the night. The beetles, spiders, and microbes appreciated the slide into quiet. Elegant silverfish wiggle and dart, sinking with impunity across the smooth flat surfaces, fleeing from spiders, hiding from the light. Cockroaches, bolder and gregarious, socialise in the open, and Martin sleeps on. The carpet beetles, elegant in black and brown, leave their offspring to munch contentedly and unseen on Martin's grimy carpets, oblivious to day or night, to black or white, to the shifting tones that come with the sunrise. Some days later, in brittle spring light, Joshua and Martin were back at Shadowhurst. Joshua, striding out down towards the lake, was calling back to Martin, "There's a swan! Look! In the rushes, a swan!" Martin's chest was feeling very tight, and he was coughing, deep and crackled. Whose idea was this stupid tour? Almost vomiting and slipping on the heavy wet grass, his sliding slopes left irregular and imperfect lines behind him in the soggy clay. He slithered, awkward and cross, down towards the lake. Somewhere in GCSE biology he remembered that swans are the heaviest and largest freshwater bird, and that they eat underwater plants. and that they mate for life. Apart from a warning hiss, they are voiceless. Still wheezing and hacking, gobbing away brown phlegm and feeling too hot, he reached Joshua, falling at the last step into him. Joshua looked at the frown and the pink cheeks, then watched a final few retches as Martin leaned over, his hands now on his thighs, his velvet coat muddied at the hem, dampness rising, and a splatter of muddy stars on the heavenly blue. Then he felt Martin's hand on his shoulder, a first, watching as a vigorous gob headed for the reeds, and Martin got back his breath. His hand still clamped onto Joshua's shoulder, Martin panted, "Where are we going?" Joshua, leaning slightly into the touch, paused a moment, holding on to the fleeting intimacy, warm and unintended in the chill air, their breath a mingled stream and hanging still. "I will play the swan and die of music," he said, and suddenly blushing pulled away and stuck his hands as deep as possible into the giant-sized pockets of his new green wool-country coat. Martin stood up straight and shook back his hair. "Othello, 5-2-1604, and walked closer to the edge of the lake. "Where?" he barked and coughed some more, scowling at his steaming breath. "Are we going next?" A breeze was easing across the water, and pale yellow daffodils nodded in tacit agreement to some unspoken secret they shared in the thin light, some hint of another story. Spring was gathering its energies to reach into the arms of a bright green summer waiting beyond view. Joshua, lost in a tangle of simmering sensations, kept his hands deep in the massive pockets and watched as Martin paused. He was waiting at the lake's edge, changing the subject to move on from arousal to anything else he could think of. Sorry, that's the cuckoo clock. It's now 11 o'clock. Yes, I'll say it again. Changing the subject to move on from arousal to anything else he could think of, he observed uncertainly that "This coat's brilliant, you know. It's ideal for carrying stuff. Really clever." His voice quavered slightly and he cleared his throat, feeling his shoulder still imprinted with the lean and warmth of Martin's hand. Back in trivia territory, the conversation could follow a familiar and reliable route. Joshua tried to forget about swans and music, knowing that they meant nothing to Martin, or just another mechanical prompt for a fact he could bandy, a clever response with no communication intent of any kind. And Joshua could not remember when he had felt so sad. All parry, no thrust. He joined Martin at the water's edge, and together they looked across the slow ripples towards the reeds on the far side of the lake, feeling a slow and distant pulse, a life of sorts. They watched a pair of swans moving gently along the lake's edge, a silent music, white against the blackened surface, sending lesser birds skywards in a noisy flap, battering the perfect quiet. The two men stood still, watching, Martin's lungs wheezing and whistling, Joshua breathing easily and stomping his feet against the cold. "What happens next? Where are we going?" Martin said again. Joshua had no real plan. It was just a walk, just a simple exploration of the territory. And Martin, he knew, was there under sufferance, keen to get back to his black and white lines. He turned to look back at the house, brown and ugly, apart from a slowly growing patch of white, a ladder pointing to the place where Simon was painting the back wall. It seemed a long way off. Martin was coughing hard again. Something closer would be better. "What about poking around over there?" he said, bright and breezy, wondering if all this cold fresh air was really such a great idea. He pointed to a derelict heap of stones and brickwork. "What for? What are we looking for?" was Martin's response, of course. "We aren't really looking for anything, that's the point. It's what we might find that matters here," Joshua replied. He set off, following the lake's edge, sinking unexpected steps into the cold mud when he got too close. Its grasp was almost irresistible, clammy and dark, whispering desire amidst the suck and slurp and rising waters poaching its surface. Quickly, Joshua was moving away from the lake and striding purposeful, confident and bold towards the trees and, unknowingly, towards the forgotten remnants of someone else's other life. Martin was unconvinced, but followed Joshua's gaze towards the tumbled masonry. Something reached the end of his life there, he pondered. No, something reached the end of the line there, he pondered. His brain painted a picture of its once clean and tidy rhythms, lost now in a jumbled series of unreconciled irregularities. Martin saw a collection of broken curves, graceless and completely incoherent. Its incoherence disturbed him. But perhaps it was worth a look, and they could work out what it had been for. That he didn't know intrigued Martin. An empty space in his noisy brain, small but growing bigger. He could almost feel it, and he smiled as he started coughing again. Through his cough, he called out, "Why did you buy that coat? It's too big and the pockets are the wrong size." Joshua turned and, walking backwards up the slope, slowed his pace to wait. Martin was still struggling to grab from the chill air a useful breath for his whistling and crackling chest as he paced slowly up the hill to reach him. "It's for here. It's a country coat. That's why it's green. No idea why the pockets are so big, though. Perhaps they like big pockets in the country." Martin, coughing less, pondered a moment. "Pheasant," he said, and continued on up the hill. "What do you mean?" Joshua was puzzled and not remembering anything being said about pheasant when he had bought this very costly coat up in Rugeley when he was looking into an investment prospect for Martin's growing portfolio. He'd seen the coat in the window of a shop and figured it would be perfect for visiting Martin when he was at Shadowhurst. And it was. Warm, country-fried, green. "What about pheasants?" "The pockets," Martin replied. "They're as big as they are, so that you can put pheasants in them once you've shot them dead." "So not for a laptop, then," Joshua joked. Martin was now ahead of him on the slope and paused again, leaning over, his forearms on his thighs, coughing more brown-flecked phlegm and spitting it into the mud, where it lay putrid, frail of spirit and slowly dying. Yes, clever, a laptop or a tablet. When Martin looked up, Joshua was staring at the woods and at a shambles of broken bricks and stone, brambled and blanketed with long dead undergrowth, random primroses and forgotten daffodils and violets, shots of colour against the gloom. The question of laptop versus pheasant was forgotten, and Martin instead replied, "I wonder what it used to be." "Since when did you wonder about anything?" Joshua shot back, and only slightly joking. As they got closer, they could see that what was left was actually more substantial than had appeared from the lake's edge. The flowers continued and outlined what might once have been an edge or a boundary, maybe even a path. Across a width of some 3 or 4 metres, there was a series of brick arches, some set low in the ground and some rising to a couple of metres. Broken bottles in greens and browns littered a brick floor. To the arches were joined on each side what looked like something that had once been outside walls. Grey, slab-like stones piled in imperfect symmetry, with ferns and grasses growing in the cracks between, were thick and solid. Beyond one of the walls, there had once been a balustrade, elegantly turned legs, lock-stepped away from the structure, confident, bold and strong before they wobbled in crisis and fell over into the dirt and lay in disarray on the broken brickwood floor. They marked the edge of a walkway, also in pale stone and mostly clear of mud and weeds. A small but a continuing stream of water passed along the length of the stones. It constantly cleansed and whitened them before dribbling away down the hill towards the lake, innocent, pure, and telling no lies or tales. Ahead, the trees and undergrowth hid most of the view of Martin's driveway, the slivered gleam of red, a menace through the trees. What remained of the derelict folly's roof was tiled in large grey slates, heavy and solid over the stone and brick walls, sheltering an empty space from light and rain and time. Under the remains of the roof, there were some broken chairs and a few boxes. In a corner, left long forgotten and forlorn, like the rest of the junk, was a rusted-shut steamer trunk. Spiders had colonised the various boxes, spinning elegant webs across their edges, swathes of grey long since abandoned. No reason for flies to hover here, nor rats or mice to congregate. The space was dead and dark, in lonely contrast to the gaudy colours beyond its broken walls. Did you know about this? Does Alison? What is this place? Martin hissed, his hands fingering the softly flattened cigarettes in his pocket. What is it? Joshua, equally baffled, chose not to suggest immediately that they go back to the house because the rain was coming, and instead said, "It's okay. I don't know what this place is. It wasn't on any of the property details or inventories. Maybe no one knew about it. Maybe we found it by mistake. Our own private discovery." Martin, indecisive, drawn, and tempted to stay in this dirty, untidy place and smoke, looked away at the lake, whispering at the bottom of the lake. The swans, sailing gently away into the reeds, escaped his gaze. He barely heard Joshua's voice seep slowly into his head, where instead whispered murmurs wanted to be heard. Anyway, it's a ruin, and it's starting to rain on my new coat. It'll be dark soon. Let's go back to the house. And that's the end of chapter 6, which was called Letters, by the way. Right, I will put this up onto the poddy cuddle toasty toasty pod thing, whatever it's called, and bid you well and have a lovely day. Thanks for listening. Bye bye.